In the shadowed underbelly of the sprawling metropolis, where the neon lights of progress flicker like distant stars, a young woman named Elara huddled beneath a tattered bridge, her world a patchwork of discarded newspapers and forgotten dreams. But what if I told you that the seemingly invisible soul possessed a mind sharper than any blade forged in the fires of human ingenuity, a staggering IQ of 1,000, an intellect so profound it could unravel the very fabric of reality? Buckle up, because this isn't just a tale of rags or riches. It's a symphony of genius clashing with the chaos of existence, a story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about intelligence, destiny, and the hidden miracles wandering our streets. Elara's days blurred into a monotonous rhythm of survival. By dawn, she'd scavenge the dumpsters behind upscale cafes, piecing together half-eaten croissants and cold coffee dregs into something resembling sustenance. Her nights were spent under the relentless hum of traffic. Her only companions are rats that scampered to the gloom and the occasional passerby who tossed a coin without meeting her gaze. But beneath that veneer of destitution burned a furnace of unparalleled brilliance. Orphaned at 6 after a tragic fire claimed her parents, scientists themselves, whispers suggested. Elara had navigated foster homes and streets with a cunning that bordered on the supernatural. She devoured library books in secret, solving complex puzzles in her mind while the world labeled her as just another lost cause. One crisp autumn evening, as the city pulsed with the energy of a major scientific conference at the gleaming Apex Institute, Elara's path intersected with fate in the most unlikely way. The Institute, a monolith of glass and steel, was abuzz with the brightest minds from around the globe. They had gathered to tackle the Quantum Enigma, a baffling paradox in quantum mechanics that had stumped physicists for decades. It involved reconciling the probabilistic nature of subatomic particles with the deterministic laws of the macro world, a riddle that promised to unlock unlimited energy if solved. Billions in funding hung in the balance. Careers teetered on the edge, and egos clashed like thunderclaps in the lecture halls. Dr. Harlan Voss, the conference's keynote speaker and a Nobel laureate with a reputation for arrogance matched only by his intellect, paced the stage, his voice booming through the auditorium. Ladies and gentlemen, the Quantum Enigma defies us because it demands perspective we've yet to grasp. We've thrown supercomputers at it, simulated universes, but the key eludes us. The audience murmured in agreement, their notepads filled with equations that led nowhere. Unbeknownst to them, Elara had wandered close to the Institute's perimeter, drawn by the glow of discarded flyers fluttering in the wind. One caught her eye, a glossy pamphlet outlining the enigma in layman's terms, complete with simplified diagrams. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the symbols as if they were old friends. In the quiet of her makeshift shelter that night, under the beam of a stolen flashlight, Elara's mind ignited. She saw patterns where others saw chaos. Fractals weaving through probabilities, hidden symmetries that danced like fireflies in the dark. By morning, she had sketched a rudimentary solution on the back of a pizza box, an elegant theorem that bridged the quantum divide with a novel application of topological manifolds and emergent consciousness. It was audacious, revolutionary, and utterly untested. But Elara knew it was right. Her intuition, honed by years of solitary thought experiments, screamed certainty. The question was, how could a homeless girl with no credentials penetrate the ivory tower of science? Fate, it seemed, had a sense of humor. As the conference entered its second day, a sudden downpour forced attendees to huddle under awnings, and Elara, seeking refuge from the rain, slipped into the Institute's lobby through an unattended service door. Blending into the crowd of assistants and caterers, she overheard snippets of frustrated debates. If only we could invert the wave function without collapsing the field, one physicist lamented to another. Unable to contain herself, Elara muttered under her breath, "You don't invert it. You entangle it with shadow variable from higher dimensions." The words escaped before she could stop them, and the physicists turned, their eyes widening at the sight of this disheveled intruder. "What did you say?" demanded Dr. Voss, who had just entered the lobby, his entourage in tow. Elara froze, her heart pounding like a trapped bird, but the fire in her mind wouldn't dim. The enigma isn't a paradox. It's a misaligned lens. If you introduce a recursive topology, think of it as a Mobius strip in phase space. You can stabilize the probabilities without violating determinism. She grabbed a napkin from a nearby table and began scribbling furiously, her hand a blur of precision. The room fell silent as Voss peered at her diagram, his face shifting from skepticism to intrigue, then to outright astonishment. This incorporates elements of string theory I've only theorized in private. Who are you? Where did you study? Elara met his gaze, her voice steady despite the tremor in her knees. The streets, and every book I could get my hands on. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Imposter? Prodigy? Madwoman? Voss, ever the showman, saw an opportunity. Prove it, he challenged. Join us on stage. Solve it, live, or be exposed as a fraud. As Elara stepped into the spotlight, the auditorium lights glaring like interrogators, she felt the weight of 1,000 eyes upon her. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. A revelation that would shatter paradigms, ignite rivalries, and unearth secrets from her own buried past. With chalk in hand, she approached the massive whiteboard, her mind racing ahead to the implications. If her solution held, it could power cities with quantum batteries, cure diseases through simulated realities, even bend time itself. But as she wrote the first equation, a shadowy figure in the back row watched with narrowed eyes. Someone who recognized her face from long ago, someone with motives far darker than scientific curiosity. The chalk snapped in Elara's fingers the instant the first symbol left her hand, as though even the inanimate world recoiled from what she was about to reveal. She didn't pause. She simply took another piece in the tray and kept writing, faster now, the squeal of calcium on slate slicing through the stunned silence. Equations cascaded like silver waterfalls, each line folding into the next with grace that made the audience lean forward as one organism. She spoke only when necessary, her voice low, almost conversational, as if she were explaining the route to the corner store instead of rewriting the foundations of physics. Observe, she said, circling a term no one had ever seen before, a hybrid operator that looked like a fusion of a Dirac delta and a forgotten rune. We've been treating the collapse as an event. It isn't. It's a negotiation between the observer and the unobserved, mediated by a curvature in compactified dimensions we keep pretending are too small to matter. Give them mass, negative, imaginary mass, and the wave function never collapses. It merely chooses a path of least regret. A ripple of nervous laughter broke out near the front row. Someone thought it was a joke. Then the laughter died as the implications hit the mathematicians first, then the experimentalists, then the engineers who had spent their lives building detectors that would now become obsolete overnight. Dr. Voss stood frozen beside the podium, his face cycling through colors no human complexion was designed to display. Elara stepped back from the board, which now resembled a cathedral window made of pure mathematics. That's the analytic proof. The numerical simulation will converge in about 43 minutes on any decent cluster, but I already ran it in my head last night while counting the cracks in the 3rd Street Bridge. The error bars are smaller than Planck length. You're welcome. The applause started slowly. 2 physicists in the 3rd row, then a wave that thundered against the rafters. Camera flashes strobed. Someone shouted for security to escort the vagrant out. No one moved to obey. Phones rose like periscopes. Within seconds, the live stream chat exploded into a seizure of caps lock and crying emojis. Voss finally found his voice. Young woman, what is your name? Elara, she said, wiping chalk dust from her threadbare coat. Just Elara. The man in the back row, the one whose eyes had narrowed at the side of her face, slipped out through a side exit before the cameras could find him. His gloved hand pressed an earpiece. It's her, he whispered in a language that hadn't been spoken aloud on Earth for 2 centuries. The lineage survived. Initiate protocol mnemosony. On stage, a trembling graduate student raised his hand. If this is real, the energy yield from vacuum pair production alone would power the planet for 1 billion years without a single emission, Elara finished. Yes, but that's the boring application. The room went still again. She smiled for first time all day, and it was not a kind smile. It was a smile of someone who had solved loneliness the way other people solve crosswords. The interesting part is what happens when you run the manifold backward. Time isn't an arrow. It's a Mobius strip with a knot in it. Untie the knot gently, and you can reach into last week and borrow a cup of sugar. Untie it carelessly, she shrugged. Well, that's why I've been sleeping under bridges instead of publishing. A woman in the front row, Dr. Amrita Singh, director of the Institute, stood up slowly. You're saying you've known this for years. Since I was 9, Elara replied. The night the lab burned down with my parents inside, I watched the fire from the ventilation shaft. I was supposed to die with them. Instead, I solved the evacuation paradox before the sprinklers even triggered. Took me 3 seconds. Then I walked out through a wall that technically didn't exist for another 4 minutes. The temperature in the auditorium seemed to drop 10 degrees. Someone whimpered. Voss took a step toward her, hands outstretched like a supplicant. Work with us. Name your salary, your title, your lab, anything. Elara tilted her head, listened to something only she could hear. Sirens in the distance, maybe, or the low harmonic thrum of reality adjusting its stitches. I don't want a lab, she said softly. I want a shower, a hot meal, and a look on your faces when you realize the theorem I just gave you is only the first page of a very long letter I started writing to the universe when I was 6 years old and crying, because no one would believe me that numbers could sing. She turned back to the board and added a single line beneath the completed proof, an elegant, terrible postscript that made every string theorist in the room feel suddenly mortally small. Dr. Singh read it aloud, her voice cracking. To those who come after, forgive us. We thought intelligence was the point. It isn't. Memory is. The lights flickered. For one impossible second, the equations on the board glowed with their own pale blue light, as if the chalk had decided to become plasma. Then the glow vanished, leaving only after images burned into retinas. Elara dropped the chalk and walked off the stage without waiting for permission. The crowd parted like water. She was halfway down the aisle when Voss called after her, desperation raw in his throat. Elara, wait! The proof, it's signed. There's a symbol at the bottom no one recognizes. What does it mean? She paused beneath the exit sign, red light washing her face the color of fresh blood. Over her shoulder, without turning, she answered. It's my mother's name in the language she was trying to teach me before they killed her for it. It means, remember me when the stars forget their own names. Then she pushed through the doors and was gone. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city smelled of ozone and wet concrete. Elara stood on the marble steps of the Institute, breathing freedom for the first time in years, when a black sedan pulled up with no plates and no sound. The rear door opened by itself. The man from the back row waited inside, older than it appeared under the auditorium lights, his eyes the color of deep space between galaxies. He spoke in the same dead tongue she had heard him use on the phone. Hello, little sister, he said gently. It's time to come home. Elara looked at the hand he offered, pale, long-fingered, marked with the same faint scar that ran across her own left palm, a burn from the night everything ended and began. She smiled again, smaller this time, almost shy. I was wondering when you'd find me, she said, and stepped into the car. The door closed. The sedan pulled away from the curb without a ripple, as though the city itself had agreed to forget it was ever there. Inside the Institute, the whiteboard began to erase itself, one equation at a time, starting from the bottom. By the time security arrived, there was nothing left but a faint smell of ozone and a single unbroken piece of chalk rolling slowly across the floor, chasing a shadow that no longer existed. But somewhere across the river, in a room that officially wasn't on any map, new lights came on, cold, steady, and very, very hungry. Elara sat at a steel table while machines the size of city blocks woke up around her, purring like cats who had waited a very long time for cream. The man, her guardian, her jailer, her brother in ways blood could never explain, placed a cup of tea in front of her. Real tea, real steam, real bergamot. Welcome back to the Mnemosiny Project, he said. Phase 2 begins now. She lifted the cup with both hands, inhaled the scent of childhood she had been forced to forget, and whispered into the rising vapor. Good, because the universe just blinked, and I'm the only one who saw where it looked away. Far above them, in the sealed observation gallery, a child's drawing was pinned to a corkboard, crayon stars, and a stick-figured girl holding a glowing equation above her head like a lantern. Beneath it, in adult handwriting that matched the scar on both their palms, someone had written, "When she is ready, the forgetting stops." And beneath that, in fresh red ink added only moments ago, "She's ready." The machines did not roar. They sighed, the way an ancient cathedral sighs when the first candle is lit after centuries of darkness. Elara stood at the heart of the Mnemosyne core, barefoot on a floor of living obsidian that showed her reflection 1,000 years older and 1,000 years younger at the same time. Around her, rings of light unfolded like the petals of flower made from every sunrise that ever happened. Her brother, No, the custodian, stood at the edge of the circle, tears on his cheeks that refused to fall, suspended in the low gravity of pure memory. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "Everything they burned the world to hide." Elara did not answer with words. She reached out and touched the air where the final equation hovered. No longer chalk, no longer pixels, but something between music and forgiveness. The moment her fingertips met it, the core recognized its maker and opened. Time cracked open like an egg. Every forgotten thing rushed in at once. The smell of her mother's hair the morning of the fire, the exact weight of her father's hand on her shoulder when he first showed her the Mobius proof, the laughter of children who had never been born because history was edited to keep them quiet. All of it poured into the chamber, a tidal wave of almost was and never again, and Elara did not flinch. She drank it the way a desert drinks rain. Then she turned, and for the first time since she was 6 years old, she cried. Not from pain, but from recognition. "I remember why we hid," she said, voice steady even as galaxies formed and dissolved in her eyes. "We weren't protecting the world from the knowledge. We were protecting the knowledge from the world. They would have weaponized mercy itself." The custodian fell to his knees. Then, end it. Shut the core. Let humanity stumble forward the slow way. They're not ready. Elara looked at him, at all of them, the circle of watchers who had guarded the secret cross lifetimes, wearing new faces the way others wear coats, and she smiled the smile that had terrified Dr. Voss, only now it was soft, terrible, maternal. "No," she said, "they're exactly ready, because I'm giving them the one thing no equation ever had before." She pressed both scarred palms against the heart of the light. Choice. The core detonated. Not with fire, but with silence so complete that every radio telescope on Earth suddenly heard the universe take a breath it had been holding since the Big Bang. Across the planet, at the exact same instant, every screen, phones, televisions, billboards, the inside of eyelids when you blink, filled with a single image. Elara, no longer ragged, no longer small, standing in a storm of living numbers that rearranged themselves into words everyone, in every language, understood at once. This is not a gift. This is a mirror. Look. And humanity looked. In war rooms, fingers froze above launch buttons as generals saw the faces of children their orders would erase. In boardrooms, traders watched profits transmute into the exact way of the oceans they had poisoned. In bedrooms, abusers saw themselves through the eyes of every soul they had broken, and some of them, more than anyone dared hope, dropped to their knees and begged the dark for a chance to undo. The mirror did not punish. It simply refused to lie. For 7 minutes the world held its breath. Traffic stopped. Planes hung in the sky like pause videos. A murderer in Sao Paulo laid down his knife and walked into the street weeping. A nurse in Lagos forgave the dictator who had ordered her village burned. A little boy in Tokyo looked up from his game and asked his mother why the stars were singing. Then the image changed. Elara again, but now she was every age she had ever been and every age she would never reach, layered like translucent film. Behind her, the lost library of Alexandria rebuilt itself brick by burning brick. Ahead of her, children not yet conceived laughed in gardens that had no borders. Her voice, when it came, was the sound of every lullaby ever sung, braided together. "You thought intelligence was the crown of creation," she said. "It isn't. Memory is. And memory, kept honest, becomes mercy. Mercy, kept fearless, becomes tomorrow." She lifted her hand, and the scar across her palm blazed like a comet. "I'm not giving you unlimited energy. I'm giving you unlimited accountability. Every what you draw from a vacuum now carries the taste of every tear you refuse to wipe away. Every simulation you run will ask you, gently but relentlessly, whose pain you're willing to remember in order to make it stop. A pause, a smile that held entire futures in it. Build beautifully, or don't build at all. The stars are watching, and they have learned your names. The light folded in on itself, gentle as a closing flower. Screens went dark. Planes remembered gravity and landed themselves. Traffic lights blinked back to green. The world exhaled. In the core chamber, only Elara and the custodian remained. The machines were quiet now, their purpose complete. He looked at her, afraid to speak. She answered anyway. "I'm not staying," she said, already fading, her outline stitched from leftover dawn. "Someone has to walk the roads and make sure they use the mirror instead of breaking it. Someone has to sit with the ones who can't bear what they saw. That's the part no equation can do." He reached for her, but his hand passed through light. "Will I see you again?" "Every time someone chooses kindness when cruelty would have been easier," she said, voice now only a warmth against his cheek. "Every time a stranger is seen instead of stepped over." "That's me," saying hello. She was almost gone, just a silhouette of starlight in the shape of a girl who had once slept under bridges. "One last thing," she whispered, and the custodian felt it more than heard it, a message written directly onto the inside of his ribs. Tell them the homeless girl with the impossible mind didn't save the world. She just stopped hiding from it long enough for the world to save itself. Then she was gone, the core powered down forever. The hidden chambers sealed. The custodian walked out into a morning that smelled like forgiveness and carried a single piece of chalk in his pocket, the last unbroken one, warm as a heartbeat. Years later, travelers on the 3rd Street Bridge would sometimes find fresh equations drawn in chalk on the pavement. Beautiful, impossible things that wash away with the next rain, but left the city a little wiser, a little kinder, before they did.